In 476 AD, a man walked into the most powerful throne room on earth. He was not a king. He was not a general. He was not even Roman. His name was Odoacer. He was a barbarian chieftain from a tribe most Romans had never even heard of. He walked up to the emperor, a 16-year-old boy named Romulus, looked him in the eyes and told him it was over. No great battle, no dramatic siege, no final heroic stand. The greatest empire the world had ever seen ended with a teenager being told to go home. And the most shocking part, nobody in Rome really noticed. There were no riots, no mass panic, no crowds in the streets. Life just continued. Rome had been dying for so long that by the time it actually died, nobody felt it. That is the real mystery of Rome. Not how it was built, but how something so impossibly powerful became so hollow inside that it collapsed without even making a sound. So today we are going to answer that question, from the very first brick to the very last emperor. The rise, the glory, the corruption, and the quiet, devastating fall. Let us go back to 753 BC. Rome was nothing, literally nothing. A small collection of mud huts on 7 hills next to the Tiber River in central Italy. The people who lived there were farmers and shepherds. They had no army, no government. No ambition beyond surviving the next winter. According to Roman legend, the city was founded by twin brothers named Romulus and Remus, raised by a wolf after being abandoned as babies. Romulus eventually killed Remus in an argument over where to build the city walls, and named the city after himself. Whether that story is true or not, the Romans believed it, and from the very beginning, that told you something about who they were. Ruthless, ambitious, willing to destroy even their own family to get what they wanted. For the first few centuries, Rome was a kingdom ruled by kings, 7 of them in total. Some were good, most were terrible. The last king, Tarquin the Proud, was so cruel and so arrogant that in 509 BC, the Roman people threw him out. And instead of finding another king, they did something almost nobody had ever done before in human history. They created a republic. No king, no single ruler. Power shared between elected officials called consuls. A senate made up of the most respected men in Rome. Laws that applied to everyone, even the powerful. It was not perfect. Women could not vote. Slaves had no rights. The poor had almost no power. But compared to everything else that existed in the ancient world, it was revolutionary, and it worked. Over the next 500 years, Rome grew. Slowly at first, then faster, then unstoppably. They conquered the Italian peninsula, then Sicily, then Spain, then Greece, then North Africa, then Egypt, then large parts of the Middle East, then most of Western Europe all the way to Britain. At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled 5 million square kilometers of land. That is larger than the entire European Union today. It contained 70 million people, roughly 25% of the entire world population at the time. All roads literally led to Rome. The Romans built 400,000 kilometers of roads across their empire. They built aqueducts that carried fresh water to cities. They built sewers, public baths, libraries, hospitals, courts of law. They invented concrete. And their concrete was so good that structures built 2,000 years ago are still standing today. Modern engineers have studied Roman concrete and found it actually gets stronger over time. We still do not fully understand how. Roman soldiers were the most disciplined and deadly fighting force the ancient world had ever seen. A Roman legion, 5,000 soldiers, could march 40 kilometers a day in full armor and then immediately set up a fortified camp before sleeping, every single night, on campaign. They did not just win wars, they absorbed the people they conquered. They gave conquered peoples Roman citizenship, Roman law, Roman culture, and those people became Roman. At the height of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which lasted roughly 200 years from 27 BC to 180 AD, the empire was the most stable and prosperous civilization on Earth. If you were born inside the Roman Empire during this period, you were among the luckiest humans who had ever lived. But something was happening underneath the surface. The Republic had ended long before this golden age began, and the way it ended tells you everything about what was coming next. By the 1st century BC, Rome had grown so large and so powerful that the old republican system could no longer manage it. The Senate was corrupt, elections were bought. Generals who commanded massive armies started using those armies not to protect Rome, but to compete with each other for power. 3 men rose above the rest: Julius Caesar, Pompey, Crassus. They formed a secret alliance, the First Triumvirate, and between them they controlled Rome while pretending the Republic still existed. Then Crassus died, and Caesar and Pompey turned on each other. Caesar won. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army, an act that was technically treason, defeated Pompey, and made himself dictator for life. The senators who had spent their careers defending the Republic could not accept it. On the 15th of March, 44 BC, the Ides of March, a group of senators surrounded Julius Caesar in the theater of Pompey and stabbed him 23 times. They thought killing Caesar would save the Republic. It destroyed it. What followed was 17 years of brutal civil war. When the dust settled, one man was left standing, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, who gave himself a new name, Augustus. Augustus became the first true emperor of Rome. He was brilliant enough to keep the appearance of the Republic. He kept the Senate, kept the consuls, kept all the old titles, while making sure every real decision went through him. The Roman Empire had begun. And for a while it was magnificent. But emperors are human, and humans are flawed. After Augustus came Tiberius, paranoid and cruel, then Caligula, who may have been insane, then Claudius, surprisingly effective, then Nero, who famously blamed Christians for a fire that many historians believe he started himself. Some emperors were great. Marcus Aurelius was a philosopher king who wrote one of the most admired books in human history while running an empire. Hadrian traveled to every corner of the empire personally inspecting its defenses. But the system of choosing emperors was broken from the start. There was no clear rule of succession. When an emperor died or was murdered, the outcome was decided by whoever controlled the most soldiers. In 69 AD, the year of the four emperors, Rome had 4 different rulers in a single year, each one killed or replaced by the next. This became a pattern that never fully stopped. By the 3rd century AD, the cracks were becoming impossible to ignore. The empire was simply too large to govern from one city. Communication was slow. A message from Rome to Britain took weeks. Enemies on one border could not be dealt with while enemies attacked another border simultaneously. The economy was struggling. Rome had always funded itself through conquest, taking the wealth of the people it defeated, but expansion had slowed. There was nobody left to conquer who was worth conquering. And maintaining the borders of an empire that size cost enormous amounts of money. So they did what desperate governments always do. They debased the currency. Roman silver coins that were once nearly pure silver were slowly replaced with coins that were mostly cheap metals with a thin silver coating. Inflation exploded. Trade collapsed. The middle class was wiped out. The army, which was the spine of everything, began to fall apart. Rome could no longer afford to pay soldiers properly, so they started recruiting heavily from the very barbarian tribes they were supposed to be keeping out. Soldiers who had no loyalty to Rome, no connection to Roman culture, no reason to fight and die for an empire that felt nothing like home. The population was shrinking. Plagues swept through the empire repeatedly. The Antonine Plague and the Plague of Cyprian each killed millions. Entire cities emptied out, and the people who remained were exhausted. Taxation was crushing. The government demanded more and more from people who had less and less. Trust in Rome, in the idea of Rome, was gone. In 285 AD, Emperor Diocletian made a decision that seemed practical but proved fatal. He split the empire in two. A Western Empire ruled from Rome, an Eastern Empire ruled from what would become Constantinople. The Eastern Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, survived for another 1,000 years. The Western Empire had less than 200 years left. The barbarian tribes that Rome had kept out for centuries began pushing through. The Visigoths, the Vandals, the Huns under Attila, the most feared military commander since Alexander the Great. In 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome itself. For the first time in 800 years, a foreign army walked the streets of the Eternal City. Romans who heard the news refused to believe it. It was like hearing that gravity had stopped working. The empire contracted. Province by province fell away. Britain was abandoned in 410. North Africa fell to the Vandals in 429. Spain was lost. Gaul was lost. By 475 AD, the Western Roman Empire controlled little more than Italy itself. And then came Odoacer. That barbarian chieftain, that nobody, walking into the throne room and telling a 16-year-old boy that it was over. Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, was not killed. He was considered too young and too powerless to be worth killing. Odoacer gave him a pension and sent him to live in a castle in southern Italy. The boy who carried the name of Rome's legendary founder and its first emperor faded into history. And Rome, the city that had ruled the world for 1,000 years, became just another city. The roads are still there. The aqueducts are still there. The Colosseum still stands in the center of modern Rome, cracked and worn but standing, visited by millions of people every year who stare up at it and try to imagine what it was like when it was full. The Latin language Rome spoke became Italian, and Spanish, and French, and Portuguese, and Romanian, and the foundation of English. Roman law became the basis of legal systems across the entire Western world. The calendar you use every day, January through December, is a Roman calendar. The Roman Empire is gone, but you live inside its shadow every single day. And it all started with a few mud huts on 7 hills next to a river, and ended with a teenager being told to go home.